Welcome to Analysis with me, Jonathan Steele. Today we turn our attention to Burma. Buddhist protesters have taken violently to the streets there, stoking up ethnic tension, just as the country is undertaking a nationwide census. It's the first in over 30 years. The census has been overshadowed by ethnic tensions even before it started. Burma's minority, the Rohingya Muslims, have expressed grief at not being allowed to classify themselves as Rohingya on the census form, while Buddhists in Rakhine State threatened to boycott the census if the term was permitted. The United Nations, which has indeed helped Burma carry out the census, has said that all people should be able to choose their own identity. The British Embassy in Rangoon, Burma's capital, told Islam Channel, "We remain concerned by the situation in Rakhine. The government has committed to run the census in line with international standards, including allowing all respondents the option to self-identify their ethnicity. We're concerned by reports that this commitment may not be met. It is important that the government put in place the conditions to allow everyone to participate in this nationwide census in a fair manner and free from intimidation." That was the end of the quote. The UN has also described the Rohingya as one of the most persecuted minorities in the world. And after recent violence, they've called on Burma to investigate reports that dozens of Rohingya Muslims have been killed in attacks by Buddhists. So far, in 2014, nearly 50 Muslims have been killed, and violence continues on a daily basis. A human rights group says it has evidence of Burma's government discriminating against the Muslim Rohingya, restricting their movements and even their family size. Fortify Rights, as it's called, has said that the government's orders, shown in leaked documents, amounted to state policies of persecution in Rakhine State, fueling fears that Burma's Muslims face a slow genocide. That report said a government order stipulated that married Rohingya couples in parts of the Rakhine State couldn't have more than 2 children, while another document said Rohingya had to apply for permission to marry, in what the report described as a humiliating and financially prohibitive process. So what does the future hold for Burma and its Muslims? Will this census help assert the rights of Burma's Muslims, or will it only lead to further demonstrations and violence and demonization? Joining me in the studio to discuss this are Andrew MacLeod, a constitutional lawyer and lecturer at the University of Oxford, who's also advised the Burmese government on their reform progress for the past 18 months, Mark Farmaner, Director of Burma Campaign UK, and Tun Khin, President of the Burmese Rohingya Organisation in the UK. Welcome to you all. Well, Tun Khin, what is the big problem? Why are the Buddhists so upset by the existence, basically, of the Muslims in Rakhine State?
Well, this is historically, it's going for a long time, and international community did not know that much. Actually, when you look at back, actually Rohingyas are the original native people of Arakan State, and it's been actually started after 1962 military took power, and persecution is going on for a long time. And what they want is racism, is they want to eliminate the Rohingya people from Arakan State. So they do want to see a part of it because Rohingyas are the largest Muslim minority of Burma. And, they have a long history. So the Rakhine Buddhists particularly, they don't want to be a part, they don't want to see Rohingyas in Arakan.
But you say
it's actually General Ne Win, when he took power in 1962, divide and rule policy was there. So current situation is the worst, we should say, the last stage we are facing.
Well, that's what I just wanted to ask. I mean, there is now meant to be a reformist government that's more democratic and open to the world, etc. And yet you're saying the situation's got worse than it was before?
Well, in my opinion, these so-called reforms are going on. But when you look at Rohingya situation, I can't see any reforms in Burma, particularly, multicultural ethnic people are living in Burma. Particularly when you look at the Rohingya situations, when you look back before 3-4 years, even the worst we are facing. Because last time we have restriction of movement, marriage, denial of citizenship. Currently, the Rohingyas, they are even fearing to save their lives. They can't sleep, they can't stay at their homes, and they can't go to the hospital to get medical aid. Recently you see, look at the, Nobel laureate organization, MSF, Doctors Without Borders, they were expelled. and attacking to their, 8 NGOs. This is the situation, which is fueling to, to get rid of the whole minority, to put, to drive out from the country, and, it's leading to, for what I should say, genocide.
Well, that's what we mentioned at the very beginning. Mark Farman, I mean, everybody's heard of Aung San Suu Kyi, the great Democrat in Burma. Has she said anything about this issue?
Aung San Suu Kyi's been very cautious and quiet when it comes to this issue, and it's shocked and surprised a lot of people, her approach to this. And when the attacks against the Rohingya first, the new wave began in June 2012, it started off perhaps, as you could describe it, as more communal violence. There was some tit-for-tat violence, there had been a trigger, but it was in a context of the government of Burma allowing a lot more hate speech and a lot more people to sort of organise protests against the Rohingya, so that when there was a trigger, an incident that happened, it led to widespread violence. But the violence very quickly became, very clearly organised and systematic attacks against the Rohingya, with by far the most number of displaced people being Rohingya. And there had been hope that when Aung San Suu Kyi was released from house arrest after so many years, she would speak up for the Rohingya, and she hadn't. When this violence took place, people again looked to her, and she was silent about what took place. So when I discussed this with her later at her home in Naypyidaw, she said she felt that if there were so many sensitivities there that if she intervened, it could inflame things one way or another. If she said something in support of what could be taken as support of one side, it would upset the other, and she didn't want to make the situation worse. But I did disagree with her on that, because I think there's no one in the country like her who has the respect of people. And we've seen a result of the silence from people such as Aung San Suu Kyi is that those that are preaching hate speech and encouraging violence, they've had a free run, and they've expanded their influence. We've now seen anti-Muslim violence spread across the whole of Burma, not just targeting the Rohingya in Rakhine State. And I think she and other political leaders in Burma, they're either unwilling or they don't understand that this hate speech and this hatred needs to be challenged, or it could engulf the whole of Burma into large-scale communal violence, to anti-Muslim attacks, and undermine the so-called process of reform that is taking place at the moment.
Well, Andrew McLeod, I mean, you're advising the government or helping them on the whole rewriting of the Constitution. I mean, doesn't this make a bit of a mockery of all that if these terrible violence is going ahead against minorities and hate speech, etc.?
I should say it's probably a little bit too large to say I'm advising the government. I'm supporting the process more broadly. It's very much a process that's run organically from within Burma, Myanmar itself. This is a very important issue within the political discourse of Myanmar's process towards democratisation and reform. It relates not only towards the Rohingya, but also other ethnic groups that are seeking to have greater autonomy within the regions. And one of the difficulties in the current process of constitutional reform is that it's not particularly inclusive. It's run by Parliament, as Parliament is currently constituted. So therefore, over 75% of the members of each of the committees that are charged with the reform process of the Constitution are drawn from USDP and the military. That limits the ability for civil society organisations and also ethnic groups, the Rohingya and others, to have a voice and to be included within that. If the Constitution, as reformed, if it does get reformed, is intended to represent some sort of compact for the whole nation, it needs to be more inclusive.
But I mean, we mentioned Aung San Suu Kyi, but I mean, all the other people in the parliament, I mean, you said it is an issue for discussion, so they are talking about it. They're not suppressing it, I
No,
take it.
I mean, from the conversations I have had, people are very aware of this. They're conscious that it's problematic. Within those who are not within the Muslim community, there is a genuine concern, sometimes and quite often misplaced, about what they fear is a growing Muslim population, connected to the census too, in that sense, because on current figures, only about 4% in the last census were recorded as being Rohingya or Muslim. That figure was likely underplayed for political reasons, and so if there is a higher figure identified in this later census, then that's likely to stir greater political tensions. But people are very concerned about raising this for fear of disturbing a very fragile political process. The generals are very good at playing different sides of the opposition against one another, and the sense is now that there is some momentum. Let's not rock the boat too much, otherwise we'll lose everything.
Well, John King, let me come back to the actual census itself. I mean, how do you think this problem is going to be resolved? Because on the one hand, the Rohingyas want to have the right to call themselves Rohingyas, and the other people are saying we won't even take part in the census if that is allowed. So what's going to happen, do you think?
Well, first, when you look at census, you need to see the first time, the Rohingya, we understand that Rohingya can, Rohingya can put their self-identification name the Rohingya. And what situation we are seeing on the ground these days, they are excluded, and President spokesperson officially tell into the media Rohingyas are banned.
What's happening if the census person comes to your house or your village and you write down on the thing, I'm a Rohingya, do they just tear it up or something, or what happens?
When you talk, we are Rohingyas, they just get out from home and they are not taking census at all. And some reports we are receiving just this afternoon, and security forces, they attacking some Rohingyas who pushing that we are Rohingyas, so we don't want to put except any word, except Rohingya, we can't put any word. And they got arguments, and some security forces are, attacking Rohingya. So we can see Rakhine Buddhists, the other side, they are pushing ahead, and government authorities are imagining that this census should be postponed.
That's what you're asking for.
Exactly.
Uh-huh. Well, Mark, what about the other issues that we mentioned in the introduction about this sort of not allowed to have more than 2 children, having to ask permission to marry? Is that really still in force?
It is, and it looks like this could be expanded to all Muslims in the country now. And this is one of the problems that we're seeing, is that as soon as there began to be a little bit more political space in Burma after elections that took place in 2010, some extreme nationalists were very quick to move into that space, and that has been encouraged by people in government. And the president himself, Thein Sein, has jumped onto this nationalist bandwagon to try and gain support for himself. So first you had, when the Rohingya were being attacked and targeted, it wasn't just about them being ethnically Rohingya, it was also about their being Muslim. And that sort of Muslim hate speech spread across the country. Politicians, more and more politicians began to support it, even in the National League for Democracy, the main human rights and democratic party, Aung San Suu Kyi's own party, were supporting some of these individuals. And so now they've proposed a law which used to be targeted just at the Rohingya. There's a proposed law which the President has now got people drafting and which will be submitted to Parliament that will restrict Muslims and how many children that they can have. You've also got another law which is being drafted and which targets Muslims, but also all non-Buddhists. So there's a sizable Christian minority in Burma as well. And so they're now starting to be targeted with a law that will restrict interfaith marriage, so that effectively you couldn't have a Muslim and a Buddhist or a Christian and a Buddhist getting married. A woman, even if she's an adult, would have to have permission from her family, permission from the local government authority, and then the person that's marrying her would have to convert from being a Muslim to being Buddhist. So this is a law that the President himself is pushing, and it's linked with really why there's been dictatorship and conflict in Burma since independence, which is a vision that central governments have had, whether they're democratic, military dictatorship, or the current military-backed government, which is that Burma is a Burman Buddhist country, and that anyone else is somehow foreign or external, whether they're Christian, Muslim, whether they're from ethnic minorities, because there's so many different ethnicities in the country. And so they have been constantly trying to pursue what's called a policy of Burmanization, to try and to make everyone like them or force them out. And this is the root cause of why there was a military coup when a prime minister who had been democratically elected started to negotiate with some of the ethnic groups about them having some more autonomy and control over their own areas. That's when the military coup in '62 was launched, and it was that military which particularly introduced laws targeting the Rohingya and were very discriminatory against Muslims as well.
Well, Trunkin, I mean, the Buddhists and the government call Rohingya Bengalis, I believe. I mean, are they trying literally to push all the Rohingya out of the country, not back, to Bangladesh?
Well, when you look at the first point, this current President Thein Sein government, have been supported anti-Rohingya campaigns, and then 2012, June and October, there is the violence, where thousands of Rohingya were killed and women were raped, and new apartheid system was introduced in Arkan state. And then July 2012, when he met UNHCR High Commissioner, he mentioned that Rohingyas are not citizens of Burma. They are illegal immigrants, and the only solution is keeping them in camps and sending them to the third countries. What we can see today, this is the policy that President Thein Sein government is implementing. So, if, for example, what you see, even my grandfather was a parliamentary secretary in Burma. I'm not a citizen. So, as a whole public view, people will look at me, I'm an illegal Bengali. That's the way how President Thein Sein, pushing forward to drive off the Rohingyas from Arkan state. So all Rohingyas, they want to put as a Bengali, and illegal Bengali, putting them in a camps or drive off the country. That is the way they take it. Current census, they take in the Bengali. That is the policy they want to move forward.
Well, I mean, are there any Rohingya in the parliament? Are there any in the national NLD, the party of Aung San Suu Kyi, or are they all Buddhists?
I'm not aware of the specifics. I know that there are Muslim MPs in the parliament, particularly within USDP. At the time of the 2000...
USDP is the government.
That's right, yeah,
party.
the Union Solidarity and Development Party. And some of those have spoken out against these measures too. USDP, in the lead up to the 2010 and then 2012 elections, sought to recruit some Rohingya to increase and bolster their numbers. And so some of them were granted an associate citizenship type status that entitled them to vote in those processes. So in that sense, there are some that are part of that political discourse. But it's very difficult for these issues to be raised on a high level. And the interfaith marriage law that Mark was discussing, in fact, originated from within an influential body of Buddhist monks who put together a large petition of signed by...
How could that be put into a constitution? I mean, to say you can't marry somebody from a
So the
different
proposal
faith.
isn't to put this in the constitution. The proposal is to pass a law through both houses of
No,
parliament.
but don't they normally have a sort of standard clause saying no discrimination on the basis of race, religion, ethnicity? Blah,
Yes,
blah.
and there is that provision
Well,
within...
then it's a complete violation, isn't it?
Yes, but that, of course, assumes a basic concept of constitutionalism, and Myanmar, Burma, is still attempting to build the institutions that would provide basic rule of law. So we've
It's
seen...
on a very shaky foundation if this is
Quite.
the practice.
Although, I mean, to be entirely fair, if we were to look at the beginnings of the democracy that now exists in the United States, there are a number of things that we would now find reprehensible about the manner in which different branches of governments disregarded the conduct of courts or other actors within it. This is not sort of a perfect process or pure process that goes on. But you're right that there are concerning signs there. Most concerning, particularly for looking at whether these types of laws would be held to be valid or not, is the fact that in 2012 the Constitutional Tribunal resigned en masse after impeachment proceedings were begun within Parliament with bipartisan support in following a decision made by the tribunal that went against the interests of Parliament. One of the key risks associated with the current constitutional reform process is that it's being taken as very much a technical process, one that looks provision by provision whether we want to change this, amend it or supplement it. And there needs to be a discussion of what role should Parliament serve in Myanmar? Should it be a very powerful body like we have kind of in the United Kingdom, where a qualified notion of parliamentary sovereignty operates? Or should there be co-equal branches which hold each other in complete check?
Or a presidential system.
Or a presidential system, or some combination of these three. That conversation is not really being had. And of course, it's not a conversation that can be had before 2015 and the elections that are held there. It's a far broader
time limit for when they get the constitutional draft ready?
Well, yes, the Speaker, Thura Ushui Man, has instructed the committee charged with drafting amendments to finalise its proposal 6 months out from the election. So that's looking at a May-June 2015 deadline in preparation for a November-December election. That means that the likelihood of any major changes is fairly small, in my opinion.
Well, on that note, we'll have to end the first half. In the second half, we'll be talking about the international implications of all this. Can the outside world, the United Nations or Western countries, do anything about this, and what, if anything, should that be? Stay with us.